My half-sister fell into the water, and my fiancé cast blame upon me. You heartless wretch, you watch her perish without lifting a finger. In a fit of rage, he kicked me into the depths, taking my half-sister into his embrace as he departed. Unable to swim, I succumbed to the watery abyss. Upon my demise, I was informed that this was my tribulation of love. Only by severing all ties of affection could I ascend. The celestial guide proclaimed, "We welcome you back to your rightful place, esteemed immortal." I replied, "Hold on, I must first exact my vengeance." The celestial guide was left in bewilderment. Sister, whatever I desire will ultimately belong to me. Throughout this lifetime, you shall never surpass me. My half-sister, Chenghuanyue, cast a scornful smile in my direction before turning on her heel and leaping into the river behind her. Wow, what a brave soul. She dares to plunge into the river in the dead of winter. Before I could fully digest this audacity, my fiancé, Shen Chong, rushed over in haste, diving into the water after her. Shen Chong was quite the swimmer and soon managed to rescue Chenghuanyue. She nestled against him, her eyes brimming with tears as she gazed at me, murmuring, "Sister, I do not blame you." I responded, "Huh? If one's mind falters, consulting a physician may be in order," I retorted, utterly speechless. Chenghuanyue pouted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, presenting a woeful visage. I was not swayed by her theatrics, yet Shen Chong was evidently charmed. With a look of disappointment, he admonished me, "Chenghuanqing, how could your heart be so cruel as to abandon your own sister in her time of peril?" I replied, "Huh? Why should I intervene?" Shen Chong arrived almost immediately after Chenghuanyue fell into the water. Besides, I couldn't swim. Would I leap in and shout for help alongside her? I found Shen Chong utterly unreasonable, and upon hearing my words, he deemed me equally incomprehensible. "Chenghuanqing, I never imagined you to be such a person," Shen Chong exclaimed, his expression one of heartache. Chenghuanyue coughed a few times before pretending to be magnanimous, replying, "Brother Shen, I understand. Sister has never liked me. It is my fault, and all of this is Huanyue's doing. I deserve it." I felt an overwhelming urge to roll my eyes. Wasn't this all self-inflicted? Yet, upon hearing this, Shen Chong appeared deeply sympathetic. I will surely take your side." At this point, I genuinely rolled my eyes. "Shen Chong, get your facts straight. I am your fiancé. Who do you intend to defend?" While I held no particular affection for Shen Chong, I was at least entitled to my dignity as his betrothed. I was about to suggest that we annul the engagement, so I wouldn't hinder their budding romance, when Chenghuanyue interjected, "Sister, I truly have no intention of competing for Brother Shen's affection. I do indeed have feelings for him, but I would never vie with you for his love, I promise." "Sister, you must believe me," Shen Chong interjected. "Enough. Chenghuanqing, you are in the wrong this time. Apologize to Ayu." I responded, "Huh? Are you out of your mind?" Shen Chong was genuinely unwell, in a rather severe sense. Infuriated by my words, he declared, "Since you refuse to apologize, I shall return the favor in kind." With that, he forcefully shoved me into the river. I exclaimed, "Huh? Chenghuanqing, reflect on your actions." Shen Chong tossed this remark over his shoulder as he strode away. I was utterly taken aback. I couldn't swim. At that moment, I felt no inclination to ponder Shen Chong's sanity. Instinct compelled me to cry for help. However, Shen Chong, cradling Chenghuanyue, departed without a backward glance. And with no one around to assist, it became inevitable I drowned. Never had I felt such utter disbelief in my life. I could never have imagined that I would perish in my prime. More crucially, I had died, yet it seemed I had not truly departed. 2. I observed as my physical form gradually sank to the riverbed. Meanwhile, my ethereal essence floated to the surface, suspended above the water. Had I become a ghost? This thought had scarcely crossed my mind when a radiant figure clad in colorful garments descended from the horizon. "Wow, a fairy!" I marveled. As the fairy landed before me, my words caused her to stumble slightly. "Are you all right, little fairy?" I rushed to steady her. She regained her balance and respectfully bowed, proclaiming, "Welcome back, Celestial Sovereign." I paused, pointing to myself. "Me? Celestial Sovereign?" The fairy nodded, elaborating, "The Celestial Sovereign has encountered obstacles in cultivation and thus descended to endure tribulations for 100 lifetimes. This current existence is the Sovereign's final life. Shen Chong is the Sovereign's love tribulation. Now that the love tribulation has been resolved, the Sovereign must sever all emotional ties and ascend to return to the celestial realm." "Shen Chong is my love tribulation?" My expression soured significantly. How blind had I been? The fairy nodded repeatedly. Indeed, once the sovereign returns to the celestial realm, all memories will be restored, and understanding will follow. I nodded, signaling my comprehension. The fairy continued. I humbly request the sovereign accompany me back to the celestial realm. Wait a moment, I interjected. The fairy looked puzzled, asking, Does the sovereign have further matters to discuss? I wish to exact revenge first, I replied. Xin Chong and Chen Wanyue, the wretched pair, had caused my demise. Surely, I must teach them a lesson? The fairy hesitated, then urged, The sovereign must not. Severing emotions and abandoning desires includes the sentiment of hatred. The sovereign must not jeopardize their merits. I rolled my eyes. So, I am to be bullied without recourse? What kind of celestial sovereign does that make me? The fairy was momentarily taken aback by my bluntness. Before she could respond, I heard commotion not far from the riverbank. Lifting my gaze, I saw members of the Chung family approaching. My mother led the way, weeping profusely, followed by a throng of servants. Once they reached the riverbank, the servants began to wade into the water, and it wasn't long before my lifeless body was retrieved. My mother cradled my corpse, sobbing uncontrollably, My child, why did you leave me? Who could be so heartless as to take my child's life? Upon hearing this, I realized my mother likely remained unaware of Xin Chong's treachery. I pondered how to reveal the truth of my demise to her when Xin Chong rushed over. Upon seeing my body, he froze in shock. How could Cheng Wanqing be dead? My mother cried, Xin Chong, you must help me find the one responsible for my daughter's death. Xin Chong stood there, silent and incredulous. The fairy explained to me. The fate scroll indicates that Xin Chong's beloved is the celestial sovereign, but Cheng Wanyue intervened, leading Xin Chong to misunderstand. The sovereign's demise was a result of Xin Chong's misplaced trust in Cheng Wanyue, believing the sovereign could swim. I fell into a prolonged silence, overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. Did he truly harbor feelings for me? And what delusion led him to think I could swim? Had his mind been befuddled by a donkey's kick? I inquired of the fairy, what of the latter part of the fate scroll? Do they receive their comeuppance? The fairy fell silent, her expression betraying her reluctance to speak. I could sense trouble brewing. Speak, I commanded, my gaze icy. Perhaps my status was indeed formidable. My cold tone compelled the fairy to lower her head and divulge everything. After the sovereign's death, Xin Chong languished in despair for a considerable time. Cheng Wanyue took advantage of this, comforting him and encouraging him to move on. Over time, he became enamored with her, emerging from his sorrow, achieving high rank, and marrying Cheng Wanyue. I was left speechless. So, I had died in vain? I was ready to roll up my sleeves. No one shall hinder me. I will ensure this wretched pair pays. The fairy's face paled in fear. Please, sovereign, do not. 3. Though I am the celestial sovereign, I currently possess neither memory nor celestial powers. The fairy easily restrained me. She pleaded earnestly, the sovereign cannot harm them. It is far more crucial to return to the celestial realm. Unable to overpower her, I resolved to employ cunning. Revenge was not an option I could forego. I shot her a glance and declared, I shall not trouble them. However, I cannot depart just yet. I must bid farewell to my mother. The fairy hesitated, but... What? Do you still intend to dictate my actions? I deliberately adopted a frosty demeanor. The fairy, trembling, responded, I would not dare. Enough. Stop chattering incessantly in my ear, it's quite bothersome. I assure you, I will not harm those two. You may leave now and return in a couple of days to fetch me. I feigned an expression of impatience. The fairy hesitated momentarily, but upon receiving a cold glare from me, she gritted her teeth and acquiesced. TSK. It seems I still possess some authority in the realm of immortals. The fairy departed, glancing back multiple times. Meanwhile, during this exchange with the little fairy, my parents along with Xin Chong had already taken my body away. Once she was gone, I immediately drifted towards my home. If I do not deal with this pair of scoundrels, how can I maintain my dignity upon returning to the heavenly realm? I, Cheng Wanqing, am not a magnanimous person. First, I went to check on my parents. They were weeping uncontrollably, their cries nearly rendering my ghostly ears deaf. I could hardly bear it. I swiftly changed location, preparing to confront Xin Chong. Xin Chong was not in his own room. Instead, he was stealthily climbing into Cheng Wanyue's window in the dead of night. Cheng Wanqing cannot swim. Can she? Xin Chong questioned Cheng Wanyue with a frosty demeanor. Cheng Wanyue lay in bed, her beauty reminiscent of a lotus in clear water, and upon hearing Xin Chong's words, tears streamed down her cheeks before she could even respond. Brother Xin, Are you doubting me? I have never wished to harm my sister's life. Moreover, I have never laid a finger on her. I, too, am deeply pained by her death. Are you here to force me into despair? Chen Wanyue's words were drenched in sorrow, and perhaps Shin Chong, finally having his mind occupied by my demise, was momentarily taken aback. He did not immediately accept Chen Wanyue's words but scrutinized her with suspicion. Why did you not intervene when I caused Chen Wanqing to fall into the water? I was unaware that my sister could not swim. Besides, she has always had company. Someone would surely save her, Chen Wanyue replied, her demeanor turning despondent. If Brother Shin does not believe me, what use is there in my speaking further? Very well, if I am indeed the cause of my sister's demise, then I shall atone with my wretched life, Chen Wanyue declared, rising from her bed and heading straight for the pillar in the room. Her movements were swift. However, Shin Chong stood beside the pillar. Thus, in her attempt to collide with it, she would inevitably pass by him. Could Shin Chong truly allow Chen Wanyue to take her own life? His expression changed drastically, and he rushed to intervene. I pondered for a moment, deducing that Chen Wanyue would likely tumble directly into Shin Chong's embrace. TSK. Chen Wanyue's little scheme was rather clever, was it not? Naturally, I had no desire to see her succeed. Regrettably, having just become a ghost, I was still unfamiliar with my spectral abilities and lacked any substantial powers to intervene. All I could do was make a feeble attempt to tug at Shin Chong. To my astonishment, I actually managed to grasp him. Shin Chong was evidently taken aback. In that moment of distraction, he missed the chance to stop Chen Wanyue. Thus, the scene transformed into Shin Chong watching in horror as Chen Wanyue collided headfirst with the pillar. Chen Wanyue's performance was remarkably convincing. Upon striking the pillar, she appeared dazed, staring incredulously at the object before her. Then, with a resounding thud, she collapsed to the ground, a bump forming on her forehead from the impact, and another on the back of her head when she hit the floor. It was a perfect demonstration of equal misfortune. I silently applauded her, cheering for Chen Wanyue. However, it did not end there. The commotion from her fall attracted the servants outside, and maids rushed into the room, only to find Chen Wanyue unconscious on the floor in her nightgown, with Shin Chong standing beside her, looking utterly bewildered. Silence enveloped the room. What calamity! The eldest daughter's remains were barely cold, and now her fiancé and the second daughter were entangled. In the dead of night, the Chung residence was ablaze with lights. Chen Wanyue's collision would not lead to her death, but it was a rather severe blow nonetheless. My father gazed at Chen Wanyue, a hint of pity in his eyes. Someone, fetch a doctor for the second young lady. My mother scoffed, fetch a doctor for what? My son's remains are barely cold, and they are consorting together. This pair of scoundrels ought to be thrown into the pond. As she spoke, my mother seized a teapot from the side and, regardless of whether its contents were hot or cold, doused Chen Wanyue's face, startling her awake. Upon regaining consciousness, Chen Wanyue appeared somewhat bewildered. When she noticed the crowd gathered in her room, her expression shifted dramatically, yet she quickly composed herself, feigning innocence. Father, mother, what has happened to me? My mother snickered. What? You know nothing at all? Is it possible that Shin Chong simply took a liking to you, climbed through your window, and intended to take advantage of you while you slept? Shin Chong was equally perplexed as to how the situation had escalated to this point. However, upon hearing my mother's words, he hastily interjected, I have no connection with Chen Wanyue. My mother rolled her eyes, no connection, yet you climbed through her window? Chen Wanyue quickly added, there is a misunderstanding between Brother Shen and me. There is no romantic involvement. I implore you, father and mother, to discern the truth. My mother erupted in laughter. You two are together at such an hour, and you claim there is no romantic involvement? If I were to catch you both in bed, would you still say you were merely discussing the harmony of life? Chen Wanyue fell silent. I was tempted to applaud my mother. Madam. My father tugged at my mother's sleeve, attempting to intervene. Yet my mother was on the warpath. Step aside. My Wanqing is in trouble, and none of you will escape unscathed. Chen Wanyue cried, Mother, I swear, I had nothing to do with my sister's affair. Hearing this, Shin Chong frowned. Is it truly unrelated to you? Chen Wanyue wept. Brother Shin, do you truly wish for me to take my own life to prove my innocence? Shin Chong seemed momentarily swayed by Chen Wanyue's earlier collision with the pillar. My mother, however, was unyielding. You might as well die if that's your wish. Chen Wanyue bit her lip and cried, If mother does not believe me, then I shall die. With that, she rose from the ground, intent on colliding with the pillar once more. The servants instinctively tried to intervene, but the moment she moved, my mother's voice rang out coldly. When someone desires death, what is there to save? Are we merely playing along with the charade? The servants halted in their tracks, daunted. My mother continued, if one collision does not suffice, then let her strike again. If that does not work, I can provide poison or a white silk ribbon. If she is so determined to die, I must oblige her. Mustn't I? Chen Huanyue had already reached the pillar. Striking was not an option, nor was refraining from doing so. Ultimately, she gritted her teeth and struck the pillar once more, collapsing to the ground. Initially, my mother intended to splash water on her to wake her, but Shen Chong, this troublesome individual, suddenly spoke up. Enough. Is Madame Cheng attempting to drive the second young lady to her death? My mother found this amusing. And you claim there is no impropriety? Shen Chong, your status is lofty, and I cannot touch you. But should I discover any connection between you and Wanqing's death, I will ensure your demise. With that, my mother dramatically swept her sleeve and departed. Shen Chong cast one last somber glance at the unconscious Chen Huanyue before turning to leave as well. Thus, the situation unfolded. I was dead. Chen Huanyue was the instigator, and Shen Chong the executor. My mother lacked evidence. Shen Chong likely believed Chen Huanyue's claims of self-sacrifice. I stroked my chin, contemplating how to orchestrate my revenge. Given that I was still a novice ghost, utterly uninformed, it was imperative that I first augment my abilities. As for that fairy, who was solely intent on returning me home, she would undoubtedly not impart any spells. I could not rely on her. I pondered for a moment, and then floated towards the local infamous Potter's Field. This place had a certain notoriety. Affluent households often disposed of their dead there. When wealthy families face demise, one must wonder if they harbored any grievances. Where there is grievance, there is the potential for powerful spirits. Primarily, they all hail from affluent families, making it easy to encounter acquaintances, or rather, familiar spirits, who are well-versed in each other's circumstances, thus enabling them to provide assistance where needed. I must say, fortune smiled upon me as I chanced upon one such spirit. Chen Wanqing? As I drifted into the graveyard, a familiar voice reached my ears. It was the young lady from next door, surnamed Tan, with the given name Yuanqing. Tan Yuanqing was renowned in our circle as a pitiable figure. Her lineage was illustrious. Her grandmother was a princess, her grandfather a general, her father the governor of Jingyao, her maternal grandfather the minister of rights, and her aunt the imperial concubine. Yet, misfortune befell her at the tender age of 3 when her mother, the concubine, was embroiled in palace intrigues and cast into the cold palace. Her maternal family fled in fear, and soon after, her mother succumbed to illness, heartbroken. Shortly after her mother's demise, her father remarried. As the saying goes, where there is a stepmother, there is a stepfather. Thus, Tan Yuanqing became the invisible entity in her home, unloved and neglected, leading a life more miserable than that of a servant. The tragedy did not end there. Tan Yuanqing, having painstakingly plotted her course, identified a promising suitor, striving to ensure her husband's success. Ultimately, however, she was betrayed by her husband and sister, who conspired against her, leading to her demise under the false accusation of infidelity, met with a brutal end. Meanwhile, her sister and her erstwhile beloved husband found solace in each other's arms. Reflecting upon this, my heart aches for her plight. Tan Yuanqing floated before me, her expression brightening upon seeing me. Chen Wanqing, it truly is you. With a smile, she expressed her curiosity. How is it that you two have met your end? I was somewhat taken aback. Are you unaware of my circumstances? It seemed implausible, as the news of my death had spread throughout the capital in recent days. Upon hearing my question, Tan Yuanqing's demeanor shifted to one of despondency. I am trapped here, unable to leave. At that moment, comprehension dawned upon me. It appeared that the Tan family and those treacherous pair were unscathed, as Tan Yuanqing was confined here, unable to take action. If that were the case, I warmly grasped her hand, exclaiming, "Sister, a good sister assists another good sister. Let us join forces." Tan Yuanqing was taken aback by my sudden enthusiasm, for our relationship had previously been rather ordinary. However, she responded decisively, "Very well." The nature of my collaboration with Tan Yuanqing was quite straightforward. She would impart her knowledge of sorcery to me, and once I had mastered it, I would aid her in avenging her death. Tan Yuanqing, filled with resentment, had transformed into a vengeful spirit, while I, lacking sufficient malice, could only augment my power over time. After teaching me some rudimentary spells, she patted my shoulder, saying, "Sister Wanqing, I never anticipated such talent from you. In just 3 days, you have progressed remarkably." I chuckled lightly. "Sister Yuanqing, let us not underestimate our efforts, shall we?" I was uncertain of the intricacies of ghostly cultivation. But given my origins as a celestial being, I presumed my foundation was commendable, allowing for decent progress, though certainly not as exaggerated as Tan Yuanqing suggested. Acknowledging my observation, Tan Yuanqing remained composed. Her reasoning was sound. "Although you have only practiced for 3 days, your adversaries are mere mortals. What is there to fear? Revenge must be swift, Sister Wanqing." To this, I wholeheartedly agreed. After all, a little celestial encouragement was spurring me on. Speaking of celestial beings, I offered Tan Yuanqing a gentle smile and employed my softest tone. "Sister Yuanqing." She staggered, drifting away from me, exclaiming, "I cannot assist."
"Do not seek my help."
I sighed. "This pertains to our vengeance." Before I could finish, upon hearing the word revenge, Tan Yuanqing immediately returned. "Speak," she said, her expression earnest. I beckoned her closer, and she leaned in. As I elaborated on my thoughts, her expressions shifted from shock to disbelief, then to a resigned nod. "Chen Wanqing, remember, you must avenge me." I nodded solemnly in agreement. Rest assured. On the 5th day following my demise, the celestial maiden returned to seek me out. She continued to implore, "Celestial Lord, lingering in the mortal realm too long may harm your divine essence. You should return to the heavens without delay." This time, I nodded in acknowledgement. "You speak wisely, but before I depart, I wish to pay a visit to an old acquaintance." The celestial maiden, pleased by my compliance, showed no signs of concern, happily accompanying me to the graveyard. Upon our arrival, she appeared somewhat perplexed. "Celestial Lord, your acquaintance resides in a graveyard?" I sighed wistfully. "Indeed, and here we are." Before the maiden could process this, Tan Yuanqing emerged, swiftly ensnaring the celestial maiden within a spell. The celestial maiden, despite her ethereal status, seemed to possess limited power, and Tan Yuanqing, being a formidable spirit and well-prepared, successfully contained her. "Celestial Lord?" The maiden's face reflected shock as she began to struggle. Tan Yuanqing's expression turned serious. "She is, after all, a celestial being. I cannot hold her for long, no more than an hour." "Chen Wanqing, remember your promise." "An hour will suffice," I declared, then swiftly drifted away. Lacking the strength to act previously, I now possessed the means to proceed decisively. First, I floated to the Shun residence. Although Shen Chong had been manipulated by Chen Wanyue, the debts of vengeance fall upon those responsible. Thus, he became my primary target. According to my plan, I would first eliminate Shen Chong, then confront Tan Yuanqing's husband and his treacherous sister, and finally return home to deal with Chen Wanyue, allowing time for farewell to my mother. However, Chen Wanyue had evidently anticipated my actions. Fearing I might be delayed, she had come directly to Shen Chong's abode, lavishing him with her affections. In life, Shen Chong had shown no interest in me. Now that I was gone, he seemed to have developed profound feelings. The days I spent engrossed in my training had left me oblivious to their affairs, but upon seeing him now, he appeared considerably disheveled. Seated alone amidst the pervasive scent of alcohol, Chen Wanyue lingered by his side, her face etched with sorrow, imploring, "Brother Shen, if my sister were still alive, she would not wish to see you in such a state." Shen Chong laughed bitterly, pushing Chen Wanyue away. "What do you know? Leave me be." As she fell to the ground, her hand accidentally brushed against a wine jar, shattering it, and her palm was immediately lacerated by the shards. Yet she uttered no cry of pain, merely gazing at Shen Chong with tear-streaked cheeks. "The Shen Chong I knew was spirited. How could you have changed so drastically?" He remained silent, continuing to indulge in his drink. Chen Wanyue, undeterred, pressed on, her tone shifting to one of reproach. "Shen Chong, my sister was extraordinary. How could she ever have fallen for a despondent wastrel like you? After your death, how will you face her?" It seemed her words struck a chord. As Shen Chong paused, the wine jar in his hand forgotten, and he ultimately broke down in tears. Chen Wanyue sighed deeply, embracing him gently. "Brother Shen, I understand your sorrow over my sister's passing, but the living must continue onward. She would not wish to see you like this. Live well, and I shall remain by your side in her stead." Shen Chong, appearing moved, embraced Chen Wanyue, and upon noticing her injured hand, his expression softened. "Your hand?" Chen Wanyue smiled gently and elegantly, saying, "As long as Brother Shen can regain his spirits, I am indifferent to everything else." Shun Chong was deeply moved, while I was utterly disgusted. You two can love each other to the ends of the earth, but must you do so at my expense? Perhaps it would be better if you both perished. Under Cheng Wanyue's persuasion, Shun Chong seemed to find his resolve. He ceased drinking, even calling a servant to summon a doctor to tend to Cheng Wanyue's wounds. Cheng Wanyue softly shook her head, insisting she was fine, while Shun Chong gazed at her with eyes full of tender affection. In that moment, one could surmise that if the atmosphere grew any more intense, it would ignite like dry tinder in a blaze. I wouldn't mind witnessing a good show, but alas, my time was limited, so I decided to hasten their demise. I had long since devised a plan. Shun Chong had caused my drowning, so it was only fitting that he experience a taste of his own medicine. As Shun Chong and Cheng Wanyue were lost in their passionate reverie, the next moment, he was abruptly lifted into the air. Shun Chong was bewildered, and Cheng Wanyue was dumbfounded. "Brother Shun," she exclaimed in alarm, but she could only watch helplessly as Shun Chong's body soared uncontrollably away. Shun Chong ascended, while Cheng Wanyue chased after him below. What a heart-wrenching scene. Until Shun Chong flew over the Shin family's lake, I merely gestured, and he plummeted into the water. Upon witnessing this, Cheng Wanyue cried out, "Someone help. Brother Shin has fallen into the water." Originally, she had come to the Shun residence stealthily, but this shout naturally caused quite a stir, and concerns of reputation were likely the last thing on her mind. My original design had not included Cheng Wanyue meeting a watery fate, but seeing her so devoted, I thought it better to dismantle a temple than a marriage. Thus, with another flick of my hand, I sent Cheng Wanyue into the water as well. Both Cheng Wanyue and Shun Chong could swim, so ordinarily they would be fine. But alas, they were now embroiled in a ghostly revenge. I floated on the shore, watching them struggle in the lake as the water weeds rose and ensnared them, dragging them towards the depths. The servants who jumped in to save them could not reach them at all. The very individuals capable of rescuing them were right before their eyes, yet they could only watch in despair as those rescuers repeatedly missed their grasp, ultimately suffocating in anguish. I witnessed their every struggle until their final breaths. A wave of exhilaration surged through me. Whether they were half-sisters or fiancés mattered little to me. They were inherently superfluous. Cheng Wanyue adored Shun Chong, and she could have pursued him on her own, but she had no right to scheme against me. As for Shun Chong, he revolted me even more. If he truly loved Cheng Wanyue, that would be one thing, but how could he simultaneously insult me while professing his love? Who desires such a demeaning affection? It was an utter humiliation. Watching them perish brought me immense satisfaction. However, my satisfaction was short-lived, for I soon saw the souls of Shun Chong and Cheng Wanyue rise. Then, amid the wails of the Shin family, 3 spirits floated above the lake, exchanging bewildered glances. This scene was utterly absurd. Even more ludicrous was Shun Chong's expression of surprise upon seeing me. He even attempted to approach and embrace me. Help! Although we were all spirits, an embrace was impossible. The thought of him passing through my body sent shivers down my spine. Fortunately, I had learned a few spells and was quick on my feet. Upon realizing he could not embrace me, Shun Chong looked forlorn and said, "Wonking, I know I misunderstood you. It was my fault. Could you possibly forgive me this once? I will treat you well from now on." I was nauseated. "Keep your filthy self away from me," I replied, my face devoid of emotion. Shun Chong appeared wounded, and Cheng Wanyue, witnessing this, immediately questioned me with concern. "Sister, how can you treat Brother Shun this way? After your death, he is suffering immensely. His feelings for you are profound. Do you truly not sense it?" Cheng Wanyue's inquiries were met with Shun Chong's bitter smile. "Ayu, please refrain from speaking. It is I who has wronged Wonking." I was left speechless. I had anticipated revenge, expecting to eliminate 2 individuals, yet I never anticipated that in their demise, they would return as spirits to torment me. To whom could I voice my grievances? I longed to annihilate them. The issue was, now that they were spirits, although I lacked the spells to disperse their souls. I had only just begun my studies. I had yet to master the techniques required for such an endeavor. A significant miscalculation. As I watched Cheng Wanyue and Shun Chong prepare for another display of heartfelt devotion, I could no longer endure it. My time was finite. Tan Yuanqin had aided me, and I could not betray her trust. Ultimately, I could only roll my eyes at the pair and hasten towards Tan Yuanqin's husband's abode. Seeing me depart, Shun Chong grew frantic and immediately pursued me. With Shun Chong in tow, Cheng Wanyue anxiously followed behind. Thus, the situation transformed into a chase. I hurried onward. Shen Chong chased me, and Chen Wanyu pursued Shen Chong. I sighed in exasperation. I had no desire to engage with them, so I pressed on toward my destination. Upon sighting my target, I acted swiftly. Coincidentally, Tan Yuanqin's good husband was entangled with her dear sister in a passionate embrace. In the heat of the moment, I promptly sent them to their demise. No, to hell. When they perished, that shameless couple was still intertwined. I believed Tan Yuanqin would appreciate such a fate. Having practiced for several days, I found myself moving swiftly, and by the time Shen Chong and Cheng Wanyue arrived, that couple was long dead. Cheng Wanyue's immediate response was to question me. Sister, how could you have become like this? How dare you kill indiscriminately? Shen Chong, equally incredulous, mournfully questioned, Wonking, what has caused this change in you? In response, I succinctly replied, insane. Before Shen Chong and Cheng Wanyue could retort, a celestial maiden arrived. She had finally broken through the formation set by Tan Yuanqin. Gazing at me, her expression was complex. Upon seeing Shen Chong and Cheng Wanyue, her demeanor grew even more intricate. Ultimately, she could only ask, Celestial Lord, can we return now? With a mournful countenance, I accompanied the celestial maiden back to the celestial realm. There was no other choice. Upon learning of my actions against Shen Chong and Cheng Wanyue, the celestial maiden could no longer trust me. Even more absurdly, Shen Chong and Cheng Wanyue were also brought back to the celestial realm alongside her. I was left dumbfounded. However, this time, the celestial maiden required no further explanation. As soon as I returned to my rightful place in the celestial realm, all my memories flooded back to me. Then, I was once again confronted with a wave of revulsion. My Dharma name is Qinglan, the first female celestial lord of the celestial realm. Years ago, after a confrontation with the demon realm, my cultivation suffered, necessitating my descent to endure tribulation. Originally, my tribulation did not involve this ghostly romantic entanglement. That was Shen Chong's fate. Shen Chong was my senior brother, and we were meant to be childhood sweethearts, yet he had always treated me with disdain. I was no masochist. Given his poor treatment of me, I naturally distanced myself from him. It had not mattered much, but once I descended to endure my tribulation, Shen Chong, under the guise of concern for me, followed me down. He claimed it was to assist me during my trials, and even sought the Star Lord of Destiny to arrange several lifetimes of profound love for us. I was bewildered. I outright declined. I had never encountered such an absurd situation. Shen Chong followed me down, and the celestial maiden who secretly adored him, none other than Cheng Wanyue, also descended alongside him. Before descending, she had stolen a red thread from the matchmaker god to bind herself to Shen Chong. I was astounded. What a playful turn of events. But what did it have to do with me? Was I merely an unwitting pawn in their game? With my memories restored, it was only natural that Shen Chong regained his as well. He gazed at me, his expression deeply moved, his voice hoarse. Qinglan. That utterance was truly enough to bring tears to the listener's eyes. I did not weep. Instead, I felt a surge of nausea. I summoned my fated sword, aiming it directly at Shen Chong. Shen Chong was momentarily taken aback. Then, as if struck by a profound revelation, exclaimed, Qinglan, how could you possibly point your sword at me? Are our feelings, our shared past, all mere illusions? I could barely contain my laughter at the absurdity. What feelings could there possibly be between us? Upon hearing this, Shen Chong forced a bitter smile and replied, Qinglan, if my heart were not bound to you, how could I have descended to the mortal realm to aid you in your tribulations? I was utterly speechless. Aid me in my tribulations? He was clearly just creating trouble for me. Cheng Wanyue, witnessing this, immediately joined the fray of accusations. Qinglan, Shen Chong holds an unwavering affection for you. Why do you refuse to consider him? Do you truly possess no heart? I let out a cold laugh. The reason I hadn't obliterated them before was due to my uncertainty on how to proceed. Allowing them to utter even these few words was my negligence. Without hesitation, I slashed my sword. Cheng Wanyue's eyes widened in shock, and before she could utter another word, she was reduced to ashes. Shen Chong, in disbelief, questioned, Qinglan, how could you have become this way? How familiar those words sounded. They were almost wearing on my ears. I leveled my sword at Shen Chong once more and declared, prepare for battle. Shen Chong shook his head, saying, Qinglan, you know I would never harm you. I could not be bothered to engage in idle chatter with him and lunged forward with my sword. Some may claim they would not inflict harm upon me, yet their lives are tragically fragile and they evade confrontation. As he dodged, realizing he could not escape, he was compelled to summon his own sword for defense. TSK, TSK, TSK. Thank goodness I did not place my faith in the words of deceitful men. Although Shen Chong was my senior brother, my aptitude for cultivation far surpassed his. He was no match for me. Moreover, I suspected his mind was somewhat impaired. He likely believed I would never truly strike him down. Hence he did not exert his full strength. Thus, when I precisely aimed for his weak point and pierced it with my sword, he wore an expression of utter disbelief. You truly intend to kill me? Shen Chong gasped in torment.
Why?
Qinglan, do you genuinely harbor no feelings for me at all?
To this?
My response was simple. The sooner you die, the sooner you can be silent. To ensure his demise was thorough, I struck again. Shen Chong's essence was scattered beneath my blade. However, being an immortal, I was wary of any potential resurrection, so I enacted a spell to completely obliterate his lingering souls. Once I was assured he would not return, I felt a sense of relief. When the Heavenly Emperor received news and arrived, Shen Chong and Chen Wanyue had already perished utterly, with no chance of revival. He pointed a trembling finger at me, stammering you, yet failed to articulate his thoughts. Shen Chong and Chen Wanyue were, after all, immortals and had not committed any grave transgressions. Our conflict was purely of a personal nature. Despite the Heavenly Emperor's desire to protect me, he found himself powerless. Shen Chong was well-liked in the celestial realm, and many criticized me, demanding the Heavenly Emperor impose severe punishment. Reluctantly, he feigned inquiry. Qinglan, do you recognize your wrongdoing? I rolled my eyes in response, retorting, I cultivate strength precisely to avoid being bullied. Shen Chong and Chen Wanyue have already crossed the line. If I remain indifferent, what purpose has my years of diligent cultivation served? Some listeners immediately countered. Immortals are meant to transcend earthly emotions. Your hatred seems rather excessive, Qinglan. I chuckled softly. Precisely because I comprehend hatred, I can empathize with those suffering in the mortal realm. If I were to sever my feelings, how could I possibly sympathize with the injustices of the world? If I lack compassion and become a heartless monster, what right do I have to interfere in worldly affairs? The path is devoid of emotion yet. Emotionless and emotional, can one truly claim absoluteness? As an immortal, I should not cause harm for my own selfish desires. Yet, as a victim, why should I not seek vengeance? I found myself embroiled in a fierce debate with Shen Chong's allies. The Heavenly Emperor observed this tumultuous exchange and, feigning sorrow, admonished me, Qinglan, you have greatly disappointed me this time. I must impose a severe penalty upon you. Though I did not believe I had erred, I acknowledged that I had indeed violated celestial laws and accepted my punishment. The Heavenly Emperor pondered before declaring, thus, I shall sentence you to a century among mortals. To vanquish demons. How is this a punishment? Naturally, others were displeased. Observing their discontent, the Heavenly Emperor added, since you deem this not a punishment, perhaps you would like to take on the task of exterminating demons yourselves? The denizens of the demon realm may not possess exceptional powers, but their underhanded tactics were far from easy to confront. These immortals, accustomed to comfort, were reluctant to accept such a challenge. Thus, the Heavenly Emperor made his final decree. It is settled. On the day of my departure, the Heavenly Emperor personally saw me off. With a smile, he patted my shoulder. That Shen Chong, I have long found him displeasing. Well done. He then added, enjoy yourself. I waved goodbye to him without hesitation and plunged into the mortal realm. The first order of business upon my descent was to visit the Chung family, to see my mother from that lifetime. After the deaths of Shen Chong and Chen Wanyue, my mother likely suspected something, weeping bitterly before my spirit tablet. However, with my enemies vanquished, she had little left to do, ultimately finding a semblance of enlightenment and retreating to a nunnery for quiet contemplation. The divide between celestial and mortal realms made it inappropriate for me to meet her, so I discreetly left a protective talisman for her before departing. Subsequently, I sought out Tan Yuanqin. Not all souls escape the clutches of death and evade the grasp of the emissaries of the underworld. That wretched pair of lovers were dragged into hell upon their demise. I had investigated in the underworld and discovered that they would be reborn into the realm of beasts in their next life, a fitting punishment for their transgressions. Upon hearing this, Tan Yuanqin laughed through her tears. This life holds no regrets. This is merely the beginning. Would you like to join me in cultivation? I asked her with a smile. Naturally, she readily agreed. Tan Yuanqin had been trapped in the burial grounds due to her deep-seated grievances, unable to escape. Now, with her vengeance fulfilled and my assistance, she was liberated from that place. I imparted to her the ways of cultivation. Even as a spirit, there exists a path for souls to cultivate. As long as one remains steadfast in goodness, there is always a chance for ascension in the future. In the century that followed, I traveled alongside her, traversing various corners of the mortal realm. Whenever we encountered injustice, we could not resist intervening. She, a spirit, and I, an immortal, refrained from indiscriminate slaughter of the innocent. But was I not tasked with exterminating demons? Thus, I devised a clever plan. I intentionally pursued those demons who, in their desperation to escape, would take mortals hostage. After the demons had slain those deserving of their fate, I could then justifiably strike against them. As the body count rose, Yan Wang, the king of hell, eventually sought me out. Qingwan, their lifespans have not yet expired. I feigned innocence. Your Majesty, I apologize. It was my failure to rescue them in time. I will strive to be swifter next time. Yan Wang looked at me skeptically. I maintained a sincere expression. Ultimately, he departed in resignation. As for me, I must admit, I would continue this practice. The end of the narrative. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to our next story together.